everybody, and welcome back to Uncovering Sexual Health. Today we're going to be talking all about consent. So come along with me and let's get learning. So, consent. What is consent? Heather Karina, in her book, Sex, the All You Need to Know Sexuality Guide to Get You Through Your Teens and 20s and Beyond, has a definition of consent, and I'm going to read that to you. Although consent should be a yes or no, there are actually a lot of gray areas when it comes to consent. So consensual means everyone involved wants, is asking for, and is giving a glad hell yeah to any sexual activities without pressure, obligation, or ambivalence, and with a pretty good idea of what they're getting into. Sexual, in the way she's using it there, simply means something a person is actively and intentionally engaging in with someone else with the aim of expressing and exploring sexuality. So if we think of that definition of consensual sex, thinking of the idea of no pressure, no obligation, and no ambivalence. So when something is consensual, it can't be pressured. It can't be an obligation, do this for that. And it needs to be clear, not ambivalent. It'd be like going out and ordering pizza and coming home with spaghetti. It's like, I didn't ask for that. What's going on? Sometimes it could be a negotiation during the activity and maybe you wanted pizza to start with and yeah, spaghetti was okay. But those are all things that have to happen before, during, and after any sexual activity. She also goes on to talk about consensual sex and says consensual sex with partners is about everyone involved freely and willingly engaging in close contact with each other, often but not always including genital contact, usually with the shared aim of experiencing pleasure or expressing and exploring sexuality. So when we're thinking about sexual consent, a lot of times sexual activity, the end goal is pleasure. However, this kind of broadens that idea of sexual activity, thinking of pleasure, but also what kind of new experiences do we want? And how do I express my body and my feelings to engage other people? And how do we interact? And it's just such an amazing, complex, dynamic relationship being involved intimately with others. And consent is really foundational to ensure that any of these activities are pleasurable. And if they're not, we need to stop them and analyze what went wrong. What can we do differently? Is that just a no-go off the table thing, or maybe we'll try it later kind of thing? So sexual consent. So the definition of consent, of it being willing and no obligations and not ambivalent, consent comes down to communication, communication, communication. And we all have different communication styles. So consent is going to look and sound different in different intimate relationships. And even in a long-term relationship, what we enjoy and find pleasurable can change over time. And maybe we want to explore something new, but maybe our partner's not ready. So having those conversations is key, ongoing communication for sexual consent. So with that in mind, communication is the key. We need to think about consent as verbal consent and nonverbal consent, and then the ongoing consent and checking in. So verbal consent can sound different. It can sound hell yeah. It can sound, I like that. Or it might even just be a, So consent needs to be discussed what it's going to sound like prior to engaging in that activity. Maybe what somebody needs to feel comfortable and confident that it is consensual is a yes every time. Yes, that feels good. Yes, touch me there. Yes, I like that. Or maybe there's an agreed upon communication exchange where everything is yes unless it's a no. So it really depends on your communication style and kind of the agreed upon communication before, during, and after the sexual activity. As we all know, we all have different communication styles. Some people are super enthusiastic and super vocal about engaging in any kind of activity. Some people are a little quieter and shyer and may not feel that comfortable or confident to say, hell yeah. They might want to just say it something a little more subtle or calm or a little more shy. And that's totally okay, but we need to know these things before engaging in sexual activity, during and throughout the sexual activity, and making sure that you check in. So verbal consent is super important, and knowing that a no is always a no, and then have that agreed upon language with your sexual partner as to whether everything's yes except for a no, or most things are yes. So having those boundaries for yourself and for the others around you. When we think about nonverbal consent, there's this kind of making sure that we're always checking in with each other's bodies. So if you are with somebody and engaging in some type of sexual activity and you notice the partner that you're with tenses up or kind of backs away, that is a huge sign to stop what you're doing, slow down, and check in with that person. Is everything okay? Do you like it when I do this? Should we continue? Do you want me to stop? So stopping, slowing down, and checking in, being aware of how your partner's body is responding to different stimulus. So nonverbal consent is understanding your partner's physical response to different types of stimulus. For example, maybe they really like it when you kiss their neck, but maybe the elbow is a no-go zone and they freeze up. You just always be checking in with their body responses and making those minor adjustments and maybe big adjustments. Maybe this is like a total stop and we'll try next time kind of thing. So verbal consent, yes, no, and having that prearranged. Non-verbal consent, always checking in with that body, because sometimes, depending on people's experiences, they might totally shut down if something is triggering them to a past experience. And they might not be able to say no, but their body is telling you no because they're stiff, they're pushing away, they're not reciprocating that intimate interaction. So verbal consent, non-verbal consent, and ongoing checking in with your partner. And it might seem kind of silly or awkward at first, especially people who are newly engaging in different types of sexual activity. However, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and you can totally make it sexy. Oh, do you like this? How would I touch you here? Or you can make it silly, depending on who you are and who your partners are and what's gonna work best for you. So the 3 things I want you to take away from this video about sexual consent is communication. Communication. So verbal communication, nonverbal communication, and ongoing communication, checking in. Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you have any other questions or want to share some of your stories around consent and what consent means to you, please leave a comment down below. And stay tuned for another video where I'm going to be talking about consent and the law. So thinking about individuals who might be more vulnerable and not necessarily able to consent to sexual activity, and our age limits for when we can consent to sexual activity and with whom we can consent according to age differences. So thanks again for joining me, and as always, stay safe and sex positive.